I'm going to describe a pinwheel experiment, a special pinwheel experiment that occurred on June the 7th, 2022. I'll be interviewing a future possible researcher, Kim, and the interview will last between 1,400 and 1,500 hours. So the weather was relatively warm outdoors, above 80 degrees, between 2 and 3. So a skeptical hypothesis based on past experience with the weather is that there should be reduced level of activation, and the believer's hypothesis would depend on whether this person is psi conducive or not. So we'll find out, interview her, and see what happens during the session. So later I'll show you we remove the dome over this pinwheel on the left. We have 3 pinwheels here, 1, 2, 3, and we're starting to give them names. I'm going to refer to the one on the left as star. The center one I refer to in this video as aluminum pinwheel. Later on we'll name this one lefty, and on the right is smiley, made out of paper. So here's the camera setup, and we're setting up the camera. This pinwheel here, the star, is under that plastic dome, and that's being removed. So this is the first time this pinwheel has been freed of that covering. I leave the room, and then we want to see, do the pinwheels stop turning? So we do talk about the previous condition. We'll go back to that control situation. Friday there's 1 activation, Saturday 1 activation, Sunday 5 activations, Monday 8 activations, and today, on this day, June the 7th, there has been 2 activations previous to 2 o'clock. So the average for the 4 days is 3.75. So the believers, if this individual is psi conducive, there should be more than 3.75 activations. If the warm temperature is the major variable, then we should have less than that. So the pinwheels are still. Here's our control video observation using the blink camera. Let me speed it up. There might be a little bit of wiggling there. So we see a slight amount of movement. And in the past, we've observed there has to be about a quarter to a half a turn of these pinwheels within a 25-second period for the camera to activate. Here's the first activation, occurs at 1,400. And the aluminum pinwheel is really starting to turn, but there doesn't seem to be any sound. There seems to be a problem with that, and the problem originated with using this office where I'm sitting right now. I was sitting here and we were getting terrible feedback noise, so I was adjusting, trying to figure out how to stop that, and I couldn't. So I moved back into the bedroom where I do most of the formal experiments, and I don't get feedback noise. So there's a chirping noise in the background, and so that damaged our documenting the communications during the experiment. Kim described previous experiences with an amateur haunting investigation, and she even took a photograph that showed something possibly unusual, and so perhaps a slight history of this investigative experience. So here we do have sound. The sound kicked in when the postman came to the door, and we see some slight amount. I'm watching this, and then she's left the room, and she's interacting with the postman, and then the chirping sound brings the camera to focus back on the pinwheels. It is chirping itself, and that seems to be how sometimes the feedback occurs. That there you saw the pinwheel again. There it is, and I'm seeing it move. So when I see it, I start shouting at it. I'm shouting out, "Hey, pinwheel!" and trying to get it to. There I am. I'm talking, and we'll see the pinwheel eventually. But it doesn't. My talking is not clear that causes it to turn. But we developed the theory that the chirping seemed to facilitate the turning. Now, presently, months and months later, I don't believe that so much. But that was the idea at the time. We thought that might be a factor. Here's another activation, 1 1/4 turn for the aluminum pinwheel clockwise, and some slight movement from the star pinwheel. This is during the interview, so we can count the number of blink activations, and it gives us a kind of measurement of the effect that a certain person has, or the effect of that person plus me. Here's the strongest turn in the session towards the end of the interview. And my impression was that the interview went very well, and she seemed very highly conducive and very agreeable. And we discussed using a pseudonym, and she said no, so she went through many months, and I had to go back through and remove all trace of her identity at the end because she changed her mind. And that happens with this business. There's a stigma associated with doing psychical research. The interview's over. Time's 15:04. So we had a very active session, actually, and there were 20 activations, and then there's a little bit of residual activation. Seems to be common in this phenomena. After it's completed, then there's some residual activations, and then it tapers off. Here's another residual activation. The final turn of the day. These are fairly strong movements. So we had a lot of turning. Here's the pin. I looked at them at 17:59. I made an observation. The pinwheels are still. Let's speed it up and see if they wiggle a little bit. I see some slight amount of wiggling there. You see for the star right here. Okay. So during the interview, there were 20 activations. The strongest ones were at 1400, 1446, 52, 1510. So in others, they didn't seem to be declining during the interview. We had a lot of feedback noise and chirping, and that affected the focus of the zoom camera. The chirping would cause the zoom camera, when I had that camera activated, to focus on the pinwheels. So that's why I got pictures of the pinwheels while the postman was there, because I had turned on the zoom camera. So here in the morning, there's no activations. One activation at 1 o'clock. 2 to 5, none. Another activation at 5, none all day until 2 o'clock. Then we had 20 activations, then 4 activations, and then the next day we had no activations. So it seems like that presence, that interview situation, generated a lot of activations. That would be the conclusion that we would draw from this experiment.